To be on Exit Nose podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Petrello. So we are excited for our ninth episode today. Someone who, I met through the coaching world, and someone who I've had the pleasure of, he's going to go over our little connection, but somebody who I've had the pleasure to coach against for many years and have an utmost respect for as a coach, as a person, coordinator, and then as a head coach. Just really excited to get him on here. Ladies and gentlemen, Coach Reggie from Archbishop Williams.
Well, thank you for that great introduction. So thanks for having me. I think your podcast is unique. It offers such a great glimpse into the world of high school football, which is such a fantastic aspect of Massachusetts football, the idea of coaching. So, like you said, I'm a 2000 graduate of Archbishop Williams. I think it's unique that we do have a little connection. So we played against each other, Arlington Catholic versus Archbishop Williams. Yeah. We coached against each other as assistant coaches, and then we coached against each other again as head coaches. I'm not going to go over the record. I would never do that. But I want to say I have a few more wins. However, you have the 2009 Super Bowl, I believe.
Yeah, so, 2008, close. Very good. Very good.
Okay, so in my opinion, you're ahead of me because that's something I've always dreamed about being a part of. So I'm a little jealous that you got to go to Gillette and you guys, you had a great team that year. And
yeah,
so you're ahead of me.
Yeah, you are 2-0 lifetime. We did have a really good game last year. Your team really played tough for me, and especially after your quarterback went down with a tough injury. Your kids played tough, man, and you guys were able to come back and win that game. And that's obviously a testament to you as a head coach and the respect that I have for you. As angry as I was, I was just very, very impressed with how you got your kids together and motivated them, and it taught me a lot about maybe what I needed to do working on going forward as a head coach. So I learned a lot from you over the years. So I'm lucky to get you on here, and you're a tremendous head coach, and we're going to talk a lot about you today. So thanks for coming on. So I know just through conversations over the years, man, your journey started at Archbishop Williams as a player, obviously, as you mentioned, in 2000. But in 2004, you had a younger brother on the team, and you're back from your college, your senior year of college, graduating and coming home, and that's kind of how I got my start. So talk a little bit about your start at Archies and what's kind of catapulted you going forward.
Yeah, so I went to Nichols College. I played a year of football, but then I also played 4 years lacrosse. And when I graduated, I was kind of looking for a little direction. I didn't know if I was going to continue into the world of education, which was my college degree. And then Bill Kincherf gave me a call because my brother was a senior on the team at the time. He just asked me if I was interested in coaching. So I just kind of came down and, I shook his hand and I was hired. So that was in 2004. And then I've been here ever since. So it's been such a blessing to coach there. I was just so grateful that I was given the opportunity to coach. I mean, there was so many great players that came through that school, and I was just happy that he thought about me, about hiring me. So, and it was such a fantastic experience that first year. It was not what I anticipated, but it would definitely change my life and definitely put me on a good trajectory into coaching.
Yeah, and again, our stories are just so similar. I'm sure they're going to cross paths if we talk about this, but the same thing. I think the coach for a program that you played for and kind of lay it all on the line for, and, you were so devoted and dedicated to that, to be able to go back and coach there and kind of instill those same morals and those same things that you learned, and probably even coaching with some of the same guys that coached you. I've always found that just such a unique experience for myself. So I'm glad to be able to talk to somebody else about it a little bit that has the same feelings and passion for another school. And you mentioned Bill Kincherf, and I know for years, Serge Clivio, me coaching on the Serge, Serge and I have such a unique relationship outside of football and how close we are, and how he's a big factor in my life. And I know for Bill, you guys have a very similar relationship. So talk to the audience a little bit about your relationship with your previous head coach and the connection you guys really have.
Yeah, so obviously Bill's first year as a head coach was my freshman year. So I always feel like we were kind of his true first class because we kind of came there all 4 years. He was definitely an old school style coach. Like we used to make the joke, we hit 7 days a week and twice on Sunday. And when I was in the program, we didn't have, a lot of the numbers. But man, we made up for it in toughness. And I was, definitely respected Bill because what you saw is what you get. He was tough on you in practice, but if you needed anything, he'd be right there to help you. So brutally honest. He was a good motivator, and I always say, fair sometimes is a great motivator. And I'm still good friends with all the kids I play football with, and we always talk about like some of the stories, just some of the great things that happen down in Stores Ave where our field is. But he was definitely a mentor, even when I was younger, of putting me on the right track. Football became very important to me in high school because I bought into what he was selling. I like the idea of the unity, the team atmosphere, everything for the guy next to you, being selfless. And I think that kind of was one aspect of kind of what molded me as a player and then as a coach. And then when I got the chance to come back and coach with him in 2004, I really started to appreciate more of how good of a coach he was, how much work that the staff put in. As a player, you really don't see that, and when I became an assistant for him, it was just such, it gave me such an appreciation for the sport, gave me appreciation for the work ethic that goes into a coach. And then you also see the successes, with the kids. And when you can take a kid that is a mediocre talent or mediocre player, and you can get him to do things that he didn't think he could do himself. I mean, once you see that, you're hooked. You know how it goes. So I just, I can't say enough good things about him. I mean, I think that if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be where I am today. So, it's definitely grateful. And that doesn't mean, at all times we didn't butt heads or we didn't have issues. I think that was a part of it, especially coaching together. So, he taught me a lot of things as a coach that I didn't know goes into it. Not just, I always thought it was just X's and O's and that's it. He taught me how to study film. He could always pick out things in film. I don't even know how he saw it. It was like 2 seconds. I'm like, how did you see that? So it definitely humbled me when I was, my first year, I was 22 years old. And I thought I had all the answers. And
that's the thing, dude. You know nothing. You know nothing.
Nothing. I'm telling Bill, I'm like, why aren't we running, a 36 lead? And he's like, well, because they got one guy in C gap and one guy in D gap. And I'm like, oh, okay. So certain things that you just never thought that. Well, you look at the game a little bit differently, I would say.
Right. We've always looked at it from the young player perspective. Why didn't our coach call this or do that? Right. And we know nothing about it. And I think that's so interesting. So, you speaking so highly of Bill, it just reminds me of Serge so much, a lot of the same qualities and things that you said. And that's what drove us back to go back and coach where we played. At the end of the day, all those morals and all those characteristics that you mentioned about him, at the end of the day, that's what drove you back to want to go back and coach there. So it's always, I think we're unique in the sense that we have that connection. I think that's the connection that we have, is that we both took over for something that we loved and we bought into from day one. And we were able to kind of hopefully affect that in other kids' lives to feel the same way about the program as they get older. So let's talk a little bit, because, we were both defensive coordinators and we did go against each other quite a bit. And I'll tell you, one thing that I really took from you, and I don't know if we ever had this conversation before, but there was a couple years we played St. Mary's of Lynn and Matt Durgan. The double wing that he ran of just speed and toughness and quickness. And
what a good coach.
Ran 6 or 7 plays, but they were tough plays. But I always watched how you guys would play them, especially in like the mid 2010s, because I felt like of all the teams that played him, you guys always played them really tough. So what I'm asking you is talk about your defensive philosophies and, what you run for a defense and what your belief is, because I know with you, it's just toughness and physicality. And that's what I know an Archie's defense is going to bring to the table when you're watching them at film week, if nothing else. So explain a little bit about your philosophy as a defensive coordinator.
What's interesting is when I first started, when I played, nobody really threw the ball in the late 90s. Not too many people in our league did. So it was always like a 5-3 or, a heavy defense. And when I came out of college, actually, Arlington Catholic was one of the first teams that really introduced me to the spread as I kind of know it today. And and you have to adapt a little bit, and you have to kind of be student of the game, and you can't stay stagnant, because I think once you do that, then, you know, the kids maybe won't buy in. But my philosophy in defense, and, you know, I'll tell any team this, is I just tell the kids 11 helmets to the ball. I truly believe with that. You don't have to overthink defense. I think that if you can get 11 kids to sacrifice themselves, be selfless, take pride in their defense, I truly believe you can run anything and be effective. You know, if you see the Super Bowl teams every year, there's every single defense out there. You see a 4-4, 4-3, 3-4, 3-5. So I truly believe that it's really about the Jimmies and Joes, not the X's and O's on defense. With that being said, I think that you do have to get those kids to buy in, you know, because we've had teams that when the kids bought in, man, defense was flying. But when some of the kids, you know, don't completely buy in, it's, you know, there's a lot of holes out there. So my philosophy has always just been plenty about effort, about toughness, which I tried to kind of instill with the kids that Bill taught me, and to never give up. I mean, I think if you can really embrace those things, that's really what a defense is, in my opinion. But it's funny that you say you used to always watch me, because I remember when I used to always watch you guys offensively and defensively and try to figure out, like, man, I think I scouted you, I mean, probably hundreds of times, I feel like, in the last 20 years. And I'm just like, man, they're running that 4-3 pretty well. They're running a 4-4 against Norton in the Super Bowl. And I'm like, wow, I want to kind of do that. So, like, I've been watching you as much as you've been watching me. Maybe I haven't told you that, but, you know, you really have to watch a lot of other teams. You can take, you know, tidbits from here, or this guy, but I think what it all boils down to, I think it really is all about, you know, that heart and desire of trying to achieve something together.
Yeah, and defense is just so unique. You know, I mean, offense is just it, right? Like, everybody wants to coach football and be an offensive coach, whether it's receivers or quarterbacks. Not so much the line all the time, right? But, you know, touchdowns are like home runs, right? In baseball, just everyone loves it. And being on the defensive side and having the challenge of stopping that week after week and prepping, I mean, to me, that's just the best when you game prep defensively and you shut down an offense that's scoring a lot of points a game, or you're making them resort to other things that they typically don't. I mean, it's just such a, you know, it is such a chess game out there. And I think defensively, it's so much fun to do.
When I got the job as head coach, I mean, my first decision was, you know, what role do I want to take? You know, some head coaches, they're just a true head coach and they do a little bit of everything. Some head coaches want to be the offensive coordinator, which the majority do, in my opinion. I just felt like I love defense. You know, it's always been the heart and soul of our program. So I wanted to kind of continue with that. And I had the luxury of having a good offensive coordinator, Bonnie Earl, who coached me in the 90s. And, you know, I coached his kids, and, you know, I felt that we were in a good position, and I thought that was best for the team.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. Let's rewind a little bit. So obviously at the end of the 2017 season, right?
Yeah.
Bill steps down, I think a little bit after, not necessarily right after the season. I think it was later on, actually. And you see that coming. You may know that he's stepping down. Talk about the thought process that goes through your head as someone who's been there for a long time, and you want to take that leap to being a head coach. You've been a coordinator, you've been assistant coach, you've done everything, and now the opportunity's there. Talk about, you know, this is more maybe for the young coaches out there that are maybe looking to make that leap at some point in their career, to talk about the decision making that went through your head, because it's a lot. I mean, it's a lot on, you know.
I don't think a lot of people, you understand, because you're in the same world, but there was so many mixed emotions. You know, one is, you know, my whole career has been building up to this point. You know, I started from the bottom, worked for free, did whatever was, you know, that they told me to do. And then you work your way up in this program, and then you blink and you've been an assistant for 14 or 15 years. And then all of a sudden, you know, this job opportunity presents itself. And, you know, a part of me wanted Bill to stay, because, you know, a part of me felt like, you know, he never got that Super Bowl. We made it close 2 years, but he never got that. And I thought that's something he deserved. You know, he put in so much hard work over the years, and not to walk away with a Super Bowl. So a part of me was trying to convince him to stay, because I'm like, listen, you deserve this. And, you know, the time was right for him to go. He just felt, you know, from what he told me, just, you know when you know. And so my mentality is, and I used to always tell Bill, you could stay here for the next 30 years and I'm with you. I'll do whatever you want. But if you do decide to step down, I felt that I was the person that could carry the torch, being an Archies guy myself. So I interviewed for the job, and, luckily I got the job. But once you take it over, man, that your life changes. From an assistant to a head coach are 2 different jobs.
Oh, it's night and day. And I think as much as you may think you know what you're getting yourself into, you truly don't know until you are in it knee deep. And there's just so much going on. So you get the job at Archies, which is, in my opinion, well-deserved. I saw you climb through the ranks, and to see, again, I see your defensive side of the ball, and I know the product you put on the field. And with Archies, you're getting a tough defense that has their fullback and middle linebacker who is going to hit you all day long, and they're going to play man coverage across the board, right? That's who you are. So talk a little bit about getting the job, jumping in, and having all these decisions to make. What was like one of the first things you felt you had to do becoming a head coach to get your program, like your blueprint now, right? Because it was Bill's for so long and you've been there, so I'm sure you didn't change a lot, but what was something that you wanted as your blueprint taking over the program?
That's such an interesting question, because I always felt like people kept trying to ask me, like, what are you going to do different? What are you going to do different? What are you going to do different? And like, it was one thing, like I really thought about it. I'm like, I'm not trying to do a whole lot different. For me, is I wanted to get back to the philosophy of just what makes Archies football, and that's just being tough, mentally and physically. So for me, it wasn't about, look at me, this is my program. For me, it was about carrying the torch, carrying the legacy. How am I going to live up to those standards? But I think that obviously my personality is different than Bill. I think I bring maybe a different look than maybe what Bill did. But I always felt like that, when Bill evolved, because he'd been there since 1996, when he evolved, I felt like I was part of that as well. Like, I helped, change the program to adapt, one, to, player safety. We took a long look at that. 2, I felt like we tried to adapt to the game of football, because the game of football has really changed, in my opinion, from the 90s into now 2020. And so I always felt like, Bill and I worked pretty well together. So I really wasn't trying to change the program completely. I was just trying to, push it kind of through the years and kind of just adapt, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. And I think, when something is going right and you've been a part of that, you're not necessarily going to walk in and say, okay, we're starting from scratch. This is what we're doing, because I don't think that's necessarily what a program needs when they have a new person come in and take over. They just need to kind of see what it is and then where to go from there, right? So I agree with your reasoning totally. And obviously we talked about, and we were joking just a few minutes ago about how tough and unexpected, being a first-year head coach really is, and all the responsibility you have. So talk about year one for yourself. I guess maybe rate yourself a little bit. Like, what were the things that you felt like you did pretty well? And I'll say, what are some of the things that you just didn't expect that were a part of the job?
I rate myself 3 out of 10. And let me tell you why. I'm a tough critic of myself. I'm my hardest critic. I keep myself up at night if I can't stop Fenwick or Spellman, that stuff haunts me in my dreams. So I think 3 out of 10, not so much for the record. We had a really young team when I took over. I give myself 3 out of 10 because I underrated how hard this job was, and not so much difficulty, just the time management of what you have to do prior to those kids coming to practice.
Oh yeah.
You're chasing physicals, you're chasing, the organizational aspect, the huddle, the X's and O's, the managing adults, the parents, the equipment, the players, and that's before practice.
Right.
So I made a lot of mistakes my first year, but it was more behind the scenes mistakes. So it's one of those things where if you're not in it, you don't understand. It's almost like being a parent, right? Like, people can tell you what it's like to be a parent, but it's not even close to when you're actually become a parent, you're like, oh, wow, okay, this is a lot harder than my parents told me or whatever. So my first year was definitely, I could have done a lot better, I thought, but every year I'm like that on myself. So.
Yeah. And I get it. I mean, as a head coach, I critique myself so much too. And I look at games and I'm just like, oh my God,
Well,
if we,
why did I stay in the 3-4 and
right.
they run the ball? What am I doing? Like, look at games and I cringe. I'm like, what was I thinking? But
Yeah.
you live and learn,
Yeah, and you always blame yourself. I mean, at the end of the day, a good head coach is always going to blame themselves, and rightfully so if something goes wrong, because at the end of the day, you're the head guy, right? But there is that aspect of the job that people don't realize that you're dealing with that is just, I mean, even goes down to like helmets not fitting and pumping air into helmets and getting chin straps fixed and, going to, the helmet kit and you're fixing a kid's helmet a minute before you're supposed to be getting in the 7-on-7 portion of practice. Like there's just so much that you laugh at, that people don't realize you just got to do nonstop all the time. So talk a little bit, Coach, about you get through your first season and now you kind of have like your official your second off season, right? So you've had a season under your belt, and let's focus more on like the field, the game, the X's and O's themselves, right? What was something you went into your second off season doing, being like, this is what we need to get better at doing?
I feel like when I was an assistant, the way I coached defense was not a blanket approach, but it was like, this is my system. This is what, and I had the players for a couple of years. So it was like, here we are. They understood the philosophy. But then fast forward to my first year as head coach, and the kids were young, and I don't think the kids quite grasped what I was trying to explain. So I kind of had to really look at myself and say, okay, well, they're not buying in or they're confused. And that's when I kind of, obviously I'm a teacher as well. So, and then I started to realize that, you have to coach each kid differently. Sometimes the kids don't respond to, all for one for all. Sometimes you have to take the extra time to get to know the kids behind the scenes. If there's a family problem, if there's something else going on, I think that if you can be more of a teacher versus a coach, I think that it's going to help you in the long run. I think if the kids know that you really do care about them as much as you motivate them, yell at them, that if they know you care about them, I think you're going to get more out of them. And maybe my first year, I was more concerned with winning, with the final product, with trying to prove that, I'm the head coach, and versus leaving some of my kids behind. And I think that was a huge mistake I made my first year. And, I do think about that now is like, let's not leave any kids behind. Let's coach all, if you have 55 kids, let's coach all 55 kids. And those last 5 kids are just as important as your stars. Because I think that's what builds the program. So I think that I try to consciously do that more now than I used to.
Yeah, and I always find that interesting because there was just so much I critique myself on too. And I think starting out, you just want, as defensive minded guys, you just want to instill toughness and you want to instill physicality. And, I think year 2, I wanted to be more focused offensively to develop us. And I was so wrapped up being so tough on defense and having that mentality that I wanted to carry over into the offense. So that, was something I really tried to do. But let's talk a little bit about coaching, right? Because taking over, like myself, I know we had a similar situation that, you coach with a lot of these guys and an assistant, and now you become the head guy. So talk about that for coaches out there who are, get into that, they maybe get promoted within and now they're coaching or in charge of these guys that they've been, shooting the breeze with as an assistant coach for years and years and years.
Yeah. So my personality is I'm a pretty laid back person. I do like high intensity at practice when I was an assistant, and I like the same as a head coach. The issue now is, the buck stops with you. Whatever happens on that field, whatever happens behind the scenes, you have to answer for that. So now you're responsible for not only a small portion of the team, but you're responsible for the kids, your assistant coaches, any sort of communication that goes out that represents Archbishop Williams football, you're the face of that. And I think that was, again, part of the, learning process my first year is, whatever happens on that field, good or bad, you have to answer for that. And I think that was definitely part of the learning curve my first year. And also creating expectation for staff when now they look at you as, you're the boss, you're not their friend or an assistant. And I think it's a balance too. I think, you can't marginalize, or, you can't push aside your assistants, but they also have to know that, it's your philosophy at the end of the day.
And so you take over as a coach. Like, what are some of the things you look for? Because I know, again, we agree on the point of alumni, right? Like,
Yeah.
I try to do is get alumni to come back, because when you get alumni, you create buzz, you create electricity, and all of a sudden, you're getting more people to show up to your games that maybe weren't a few years back. So talk about your thoughts about hiring alumni as coaches on your staff.
Yeah. So on my staff, I have, let's see, one, two, three, I think 5 coaches currently, or 6 coaches, and 5 out of the 6 are Archies guys. So I have a pretty good, well-balanced staff. And my line coach, Mark Crowley, he's been coaching since the early 90s. He's been to BC High. He's been to Duxbury. So I think it's just as important to have sometimes guys outside the program, because they'll be brutally honest, where everybody else has been in the same system for 20 some odd years. And we've all learned really from one guy. So I think it's also important to really have an open mind of changing certain things at practice, or changing philosophies of X's and O's. I think that's a healthy combination as well.
Yeah, and I think part of a growth of a staff is having an experienced staff, right? And a big thing for me when I took over was to get my coaches educated immediately, right? Going to clinics or webinars or whatever it is that we did. Talk about how you and your staff educate yourself in the off season, because football is a game that's changing. You said it. It's changed from the mid 90s to what it is now, specifically the CCL where we were involved. Used to be 22 guys in the line of scrimmage and everybody's running the football. I mean, that's what our league used to be. It is now just so much more diverse in offense and defense. And so talk about how you guys educate yourselves in the off season as football coaches.
Well, we do go to a lot of the clinics. I think the Gillette one is very good. The BC college, one was very actually beneficial. My mentality going into those clinics, that if you can steal one thing from those clinics, it was all worth it. I think the clinics have gotten a lot better since once they started. I thought they're more specific. And I also love the element now that they bring in high school coaches that have had success to kind of talk a little bit about high school football, because I still am a firm believer that high school and college are 2 different sports. I think that, however, it does trickle down, but I really do think like high school's such a different beast, because they're still kids. Where in college and obviously the pros, they're young men. So I think that keeping up on the times is being aware of, colleges and what the pros are doing, but still being fundamentally sound in high school, and, watching a ton of film. My coaches always joke around that I'm on huddle, 99% of my day. So I'm always trying to learn. I've watched so much film. I watched the Arlington Catholic film the other day when you ran a speed sweep, but the guards pulled the other way and everybody was confused. So, I mean, I still watch a lot of old films that, and trying to figure out like, what was I thinking here? So I think that's one aspect of how I try to stay up to date, is just watching a ton of film, having conversations with my coaches, and just being open-minded to other coaches' ideas.
Yeah, and I think going back and watching your film, especially the bad film, is just so important, because you start looking at it and you say to yourself, am I predictable? And if so, where am I predictable? How come this stuff is happening against me? What is it that I do and show and tell that I don't realize I do? So watching a lot of films, specifically the film that goes bad or things that go wrong, is you just got to look at it and say to yourself, where did I miss something? Or am I showing something from the previous film to make this team know that they, or think that they can do X, Y, and Z against me? So I think critiquing yourself is just so healthy in everything. You have to.
First of all, I love the game of football because I truly believe it's one of the last team sports out there.
Yeah.
And the part about critiquing yourself, I've learned more as a head coach and an assistant coach from losing than I ever have from winning. Because I'm thinking some of the years back when we won games, and I look at those players and I'm thinking like, I don't think this team could have lost if they had to. You just have a better team. I always thought some of Bill and I's best years coaching when we were 5-5 and we got 7-3. We got those kids to win 7 games, and they shouldn't have. And I think that's where you learn when you lose. So, and it humbles you, you know what I mean? You could be, 9-3, you guys beat Norton in the Super Bowl. And then the next year, you had a good team again the next year, but and then, yeah, I know my history. And then a couple years later, if you don't have those kids, you get humbled, and you have to go back and you have to really coach, fundamentals, because, you got to get those kids to believe again. And I think that's where you learn how to really coach.
Yeah, and for me, it was in, my first year as coordinator in 2008, we won the Super Bowl, right? And then the next year, that defense was arguably a lot better, but it was the third year that we had very little amount of seniors, very lot of kids that had experience, and we played a lot of young guys. And early on, we took some thrashings. And for me as a coach, the next 5 was one of the funnest years I've coached, those 5 games, because we were so different and diverse on defense that it forced me to really, we played Fenwick, who would run jailbreak better than anybody in the state. Oh. And I'll say that now, that I think they still run it better than anybody in the state of Massachusetts. And they had a receiver, I don't know his name, but he had a bazillion catches one season. I think he broke the Massachusetts high school record, or might have even in the country. He had over 100 and something catches.
Yep.
But the point I was making is they didn't run the football the entire time we scouted them, and then on film. So we just played no down linemen and had guys standing up and just moving around and blitzing all different spots the entire game, because that's what, we're just going to start not being this 3-4 defense and that's it. We're going to be adjust every week to what we see, and going to teach these kids how to play it right. And then the next year we went 11-1, and defensively we were very good. So, there is just, I think, going back and watching yourself and saying, what am I doing wrong? It's so important. And as a coach, if you don't do that, you need to, because education is important, and self-education is the most important.
The hardest part, in my perspective, in a defensive coordinator, is getting out of your comfort zone, right? Because you teach these kids to be, everything's solid and everything's sturdy, and you don't give up an inch. But to think out of your comfort zone, like you just said, and you have success, it takes a lot of guts.
Yeah.
And when you do have success and you do guess right, it is quite a learning experience as a coach.
And kids buy into, all of a sudden your coach is creative, and now you're winning, and these kids want to play defense, and practice starts being better, and it's more physical. And yeah, there's a lot to it. There's definitely a lot to it. One thing that I don't envy you for right now is coaching during COVID-19. I've asked every coach that's on here, and last week I had a soccer coach on. It was actually the first coach that I've interviewed that actually was playing during COVID times, and just kind of hearing his experiences was funny. But talk about, navigating your team through this really difficult time.
It is a difficult time, because I have a great group of seniors, really good team, just good kids. And all they want to do is play. All they want to do is lift weights. All they want to do is participate. They just want to do things that are football related. And it's very difficult to convey the message to them to be patient. It'll come to you, because, it's what they've been waiting for. A lot of these seniors, have played since they've been sophomores. So they're waiting for their time to shine. So I think one key aspect during this COVID is communicating with them. We had a few Zoom meetings, and really keep their motivation up and keep encouraging them and engage them in football related activities the best we could. But just really, so they don't feel like, I'm abandoning them, so I just pray that they get the season that they deserve, win or lose. That I just feel like, I had such a great experience as a player and as a coach through this, program, and high school football is so special. I played 1 year at college, and it's, in my opinion, is not the same as high school football. And I just want these kids to have this experience, because they deserve it.
Yeah, I agree. As I said, I can't imagine, navigating a team through this and how difficult it is, because, you're an educator too, like myself. And, part of being, I think, successful football coaches is when you have that experience of working with kids in the classroom, and you're seeing kids from all different angles and all different views, both in the classroom and out of the classroom. It's you understand the complete player, the complete person, and you understand that there's a lot of stuff that goes on outside of football too that affects these kids' lives, and being able to help them navigate through this. It takes a lot for coaches to do, and I think they deserve so much credit for doing that, because they're keeping these kids' world as they're trying to, as normal as possible during this, to make them feel like, you know, they're going to get a season and they're still going to play, and we still have pride, and, you know, this is who we are, and we're going to rise above this as a team.
Yeah.
I think it takes a lot for coaches to do that. So I thank you guys for that, because I know it helps these kids, you know, with their mental health and everything else, to make sure that they have things to look forward to and be a part of.
Sports are so important in our society. It's really one of the first things in my life that you learn to be, it's bigger than yourself, right? You're part of this team and you're just one component of it. And, you know, but you're all have the same goal. And sports are so crucial to, you know, child development, that you can't put a price tag on it. You know, I don't know where I would be right now if it wasn't for sports, specifically high school football. And there's so many kids, you know, that were like me, right? So, you know, and I wasn't the best student when I was in high school, but football kind of guided me in the right direction, and it was bigger than myself, and it's something where you don't want to let the guy next to you down. And I think that I just want these kids, and all the kids really, you know, in Massachusetts, just to have that experience like we all had.
Right. Absolutely. So. And I think, you know, it goes worth saying, you know, that we didn't mention this earlier, but, you know, you have a baby this time around in the off season, a 6-month-old baby. And, you know, that changes everything for you. So as a dad who understands that and had twins, like right after my first season, talk a little bit about how just like your world has changed as, you know, as a husband and coach, and now as a dad.
Thank God my wife's upstairs when you asked me that. So this is interesting. So, you know, we had our first baby in April, kind of, you know, I think March 16th was the last day, because I'm a Boston public school teacher, that we were sent home. So, you know, right. Really like 4 weeks later, I have a child, and during COVID, which I'm so grateful that we could have the time off to be with him. While at the same time, it's hard because, you know, the world's kind of coming to an end and people are dying, but it was such a unique, and then I'm, you know, also trying to keep my players motivated and engaged and not lose faith. It was such a mixed bag of emotions the last like 6 or 7 months. Obviously it's fantastic being a father. But I hope that these kids get their season. And another aspect of being a husband, my wife used to always make the joke, like once August hit, when she was talking to me, like I wasn't even there. She was like, I know you're thinking about football. You're not even listening to me. And so I'm trying to do a better job of being, you know, when football's over, putting it aside, not thinking about it forever. You know how it goes, you know. You wake up at 3 a.m, you're thinking about Bishop Fenwick running a wide receiver screen that you can't stop. Right. You know, so you're trying to have that balance of, you know, your family, football, because you've committed to these kids, and also your career as a teacher. So I'm learning how to try to juggle all of them, but then also keep in the back of my mind that family should be, you know, your number one priority.
Absolutely. It's just being a dad is just the coolest thing in the world. I have twins, and we were talking about this, like, hey, I'm running a few minutes late. I got to put them to bed, and I'm by myself here, and this is kind of crazy. So, you know, I'm glad you get to experience that as a head coach and being a dad, and just, it's amazing stuff. And obviously we thank your wife, right? Because, you know, for you to be able to affect these kids and then be the positive influence you are, obviously you make sacrifices at home, and your wife allowing you to affect people's lives the way that you do it's a big thank you to her. Talk about that. I mean, obviously sacrifices a lot. You've been coaching for a really long time. And as a young kid, you know, you're making a lot of sacrifices that not a lot of 22, 23, 24-year-old kids are making on Friday and Saturday night. So talk a little bit about the sacrifices you've made to kind of get to the spot that you're at.
You know, there was a lot of sacrifices over time. Obviously the family time was number one. You know, the sleep and the stress, which you understand what that is like. You know, you can't shut your brain off because, you know, the game's coming up, and even though you think you've done all your homework, you know, you think, well, what if they come out and they run something where everyone stands up and no one's on the line of scrimmage? Or what if they come out in 5 wide, or they go to double tight, and like these things run through your head. So it's that stress, but it's a good stress. You know, I think from, you know how it goes, from really August to Thanksgiving, you're booked, and the other months you're also still working. So it's really a 12-month gig right now. I think the old days of you just show up in August are over. I think with the 7v7s and all these other camps and the kids trying to get their tapes out to colleges, that it's a 12-month job.
Yeah. And let's be real too. I mean, it's a 12-month job, 12-month job a year, and you don't really get paid for that, right? So a lot of it is money out of your own pocket, or a lot of it is just it's a year-round gig that people kind of just don't understand that aspect of.
If you tried to explain to someone that you're going to work 12 months out of the year and at the end of the year you'd lose money, they would think you're crazy. Someone would actually tell you, like, what's wrong with you? But the way I look at it, when I was 22 and I started coaching, like, you can't put a price tag on it. It's made me such a better person. When I was 22, if I didn't coach, I don't know what else I would do. As a young kid, I was really a kid at 22, and it was such a positive influence on me because I don't know if I would have made 100% positive decisions at 22. But again, just like when I was in high school, it was something bigger than me. So when I was in my 20s, and when I was still a kid, I always thought about that. Like, if I don't go to practice, if I decide I don't want to coach, am I letting the kids down? And for me, it was just like, absolutely. Even if there was 2 kids a year that connected with me, I felt like then it was worth it. So at the end of the day, as much as I do joke that, obviously we lose money, which is true, I do love it. I mean, it's made me a better person, I think.
Yeah. And I think that's it, right? At the end of the day, it's you and I are lucky. We had guys like Bill and Serge who instilled that us at a young age, and we bought into it. Even when we got out of college, we both we wanted it. We wanted to be back. We knew what we wanted to do. And we have a lot to thank to those guys. What's your advice to young coaches? Just to kind of wrap this up before our 2-minute drill here. What's your advice to young coaches looking to make that jump like you did?
Number one, I think you check your ego at the door. I don't care if you were All-American, All-Conference, or even if you were in the pros. I think the second you come back, you need to you're no longer a player. I think you need to put that aside. I've seen some coaches come in and it's about them, not about the kids. I think that's one aspect that you need to do. I don't think there's any job that's too small for you. My first year, I was fixing the kids' helmets. I was, the old AirPads used to pop out
all the time.
And there would be 25 freshmen. They want me to fix their helmets 5 minutes before practice, and I did, and I don't think being a freshman or JV coach is an insult. I think you learn more down there than you think you do. And you learn how to manage the kids. I think that at the end of the day, it's about the kids. It's not about you. It's not about ego. It's about, you have kids in front of you that are looking at you and they want you to motivate them. They want you to care about them. And that's what it really comes down to. And I think at the end, it's just have fun,
Yeah. And I think that's it, right? It really is the hard work. Like you mentioned coaching JV and freshmen, like that's where I learned everything. I mean, I coached with my older brother when we coached freshmen. He was our offensive coordinator, won the Super Bowl, defensive coordinator. Yeah. And then when I coached JV, I coached, under Ainsley Rosenbaum, who's the head football coach at Framingham State, who's, in my opinion, one of the best coaches I've ever seen, period, and talked football with. He's a genius. And then Mike DeCenzo, he coached at Merrimack College, as a O-line coach. So, I coached with some pretty good guys at those lower levels that kind of took, pay their dues down there too, and then moved on to even more in football. So absolutely. I love that you said that because that's just missing. It really is.
Do you know how much I've learned on a Thursday or a Saturday morning when I had to take a bus to Arlington Catholic and we had to play in the old dirt field, and I don't think there was only one goal post, and there was a big puddle in the middle of the field, so we just kept running the other way. I mean, they don't teach you that when you start, right? So, but that's where you learn. Or a kid that's never played before, and you have to kind of, in 20 minutes, turn them into a tackle. So, and that's the stuff. And the same thing, I'm a teacher. My first 3 years, I was a substitute in Boston Public Schools. I learned everything how to survive in those first 3 years. So I think that no job is too small. Be humble, and I think, you'll have success.
Awesome. This was a great interview, man. And I just want to say, you and I rose up in this league together, and they were amazing coaches like Serge Clivio and Bill Kinshirf and Dave Woods and Bill Maraday and Ron St. George and Matt Jerry. I mean, we played and planned against some really, really good coaches. And
DCL's underrated.
It really is, man. Having a plan for those names that you just named, and you're seeing all different offenses. You're seeing double tight, double wing, a zillion sets from Cardinal Spellman. Fenwick, you're seeing so much spread. You're seeing double tight, double wing. The best is ran by two coaches who just killed it. I mean, we grew up in that league, and we really learned how to coach against some real good coaches. So for that, I'm extremely grateful to be able to do that with you. But we got our 2-minute drill here. This is how it works. It's going to fire as many rapid fire questions I can in 2 minutes. There is a booth review, and I also do give the guest a little review if they want to explain and answer a little bit more, because sometimes I do ask that tough question. So we get the timer, and we're gonna set off here. So, what would you prefer as a head coach? Having a stud O-line or having stud linebackers?
Stud linebackers.
Okay, I'm going to throw the flag on that because as a defensive guy, I would love to hear your answer.
The linebackers are still the core of the program. You get good linebackers. Those are the football players, right? Everything starts with them. If you got some studs right there, because I'm thinking middle linebacker and fullback, you know me. So if I got those 4 kids that are playing linebacker, I got 2 tight ends, a running back, and a fullback.
That's it. I mean, that's Archbishop Williams football right there.
Right there.
All right. 4th and goal from the 3-yard line. What are you running?
I'm giving it to my best player.
Okay. Best defense you've ever coached as a coordinator at Archbishop Williams?
Ooh, that's a good one. 2016.
Okay. Best O-lineman you've seen come to the program since you've been there?
Wow, that's a good question.
You guys had some good ones, so I actually am curious about this.
I'm gonna get some hate texts after this. Best O-lineman since I've been there. Wow, that's a solid question. I'm gonna go with. I know I'm gonna regret this play.
I'll give you a chance to explain it too.
My brain's just going through 20 years. I'm gonna go with Tom Zeminski, 2005.
All right. Perfect. Okay. Who's the best team in the NFL right now?
I don't know.
I mean, you really don't. I mean, every team's out every week. They got a million guys
with the COVID, how do you determine who's the best team? I mean, I don't know.
Right. Well, all right. With that being said, if you are Trevor Lawrence and the New York Jets have the #1 pick overall in the draft, are you going back to Clemson?
I go back to Clemson. I mean, that's just me.
All right. And last question. What would you say is your favorite thing about coaching football?
Kids.
Okay. All right. You've survived the 2-minute drill, man. Great job. And as I said to you before, I've been really, really happy that I've been able to share my coaching experience with someone who's kind of risen up really the same time, as starting to assistants to coordinators to head coaches. I mean, there are a lot of parallels between us. And I was really, really lucky and blessed to have you come on here today because you were somebody who I was hoping that would be interested in this. And you far exceeded expectations, on here today. But as a football coach, I just have the utmost respect for you. And I am a big fan of yours, a big fan of your program.
I've always admired your program. I've always admired you as a coach. I always like to talk to you before the games.
Yep.
You were always straightforward. No ego involved at all. I thought you were always a gentleman. I thought your staff was always good people. And there's always some really good games we have with one another. I wish you the best in the future. And, I'm not going to say we're going to, I'm going to try to beat AC this year.
That's the one game I'm going to have to root against you for.
That's all right. We'll do a podcast after the game. You can critique my defense.
Absolutely. I'll do a live podcast during the game. But seriously, Coach, we're really lucky to have you on here. And I just think you give such a positive message to young coaches out there that, grinding and going through and working hard and working your way up and earning it is just an amazing feeling when you get to the pinnacle, when you get to the top of it. So thank you for coming on here. Thank you for educating these coaches that are going to be listening to you very soon. And again, we'll definitely have you back on here for sure. Good luck with your season.
Thank you very much.
All right. From Beyond Exodomes podcast, I'm Anthony Petralis. Good night.